All right, all right. Clap it up, clap it up, clap it up. Once again. This is the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge out of 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under commanding General Yohana. This is the 1 West News Desk, hosted by Captain Siparia and Officer Matham Shikaria. I'm holding it down for Captain Siparia today. You understand? We're going to give you a little international news and national news, some local news, and we're going to mix it in like we always say. We're going to keep our people up on what's going on in our town and around our town and in this country and in this globe. You know what I mean? First article, let's read this first article. It says nearly 104 pounds of psychedelic drugs, DMT, seized by custom officers in Baltimore. That's crazy, psychedelic, 104 pounds. Remember, back in June 2019, they seized 333 pounds of cocaine off the Baltimore port. On that same day, June 19th, June 20th, something like that, 2019, they seized over 10,000 pounds right in the port of Philadelphia on the same day. We hear about these drug busts that they have, in our major cities. They never tell you about the drug busts that happen, on the outskirts, and they really don't talk about those. You understand? Because they always want to make it seem like, all of the problems and everything is happening in the major cities where blacks and Hispanics live at. You understand what I'm saying? But every time we have a drug bust like this, no one is ever arrested. No one is ever charged. You understand? And you also need to think like this, right? Whenever they have a drug bust like this, drugs get seized, but there's a lot of drugs that go through. They Okay, we back. Just had a little technical difficulty. Like I was saying, right? They usually have these drug busts and show them on TV to make you think that they're, doing their job. They're keeping the city clean of the drugs and narcotics. But if you remember, when the COVID hit, everything shut down. Everything shut down except for drugs. You understand? Because drugs is a priority for our oppressor. You understand? They need to have those drugs to get through. You understand? Because that's one of their major things, is getting drugs into the country, getting them into our neighborhoods and destroying our people. You understand? So let's read this article. It says U.S. Customs and Border Protection officers in Baltimore seized nearly 104 pounds of psychedelic drugs, DMT, that was headed to Harford County. Now, they know where it's headed, and nobody. Let's read. According to CBP agents, 2 shipments of 23 black vacuum sealed bags were intercepted on July 18th and July 23rd. Then inspected by officers. While examining the bags, the officers observed a brown powdery substance. The substance was sent to scientists at CBP's laboratories, and the scientific services for a full lab analysis. On August the 7th, scientists confirmed that the substance tested positive for DMT. In total, the 46 bags weighed a combined 47 kilograms, or 104 pounds and 10 ounces, and had a street value of $80,000 per CBP officer. Customs and Border Protection's security mission prioritizes intercepting dangerous drugs. If they prioritize intercepting dangerous drugs, our streets will be clean. This is a lie. And like I said before, a lot of these drugs busts that they do this to make it seem like they're on their job and they're doing what they're supposed to do. When in fact, in actuality, they are doing their job to deceive the people in Baltimore City and other cities where they bring these drugs in. You understand? And then they always point to a South American country. They never point towards the countries that this stuff really comes. I'm not saying that, no drugs comes from these South American countries, but these drugs are getting in. And a lot of them, just like a lot of that fentanyl is coming from China and all of that. They caught a couple of Asians coming across the Mexican border, back down with fentanyl. You understand? And with e-pills. You understand? This is not just a war. This is not just a war on drugs. This is a war on blacks and Hispanics. You understand? And it's being waged by all the heathens, all these other nations. You understand? It's being waged by all these other nations on us. And this is where they're getting a lot of their money from. And now it says, Custom and Border Protection's border security mission prioritizes intercepting dangerous drugs such as DMT at our nation's ports of entry that could harm U.S. citizens and destroy our communities. See, listen, they said could harm U.S. citizens and destroy our communities. Now, our blacks and Hispanics have already been harmed by these drugs. Our communities have already destroyed by these drugs. So what are they talking about? That one thing should let you know that we are not considered U.S. citizens by any means. You understand? You see what ICE immigration is doing. You understand? You see what's happening to blacks in these prisons. You understand? That goes to show you where you stand at in America. And this is the reason why we should never stand with America. We can be in America, we can live in America, but we should never stand with America. We should never stand on the principles of America. The principles of America goes against real principles. You understand? The principles of America goes against real principles. America has no principles. Let's read. Let's finish this. It says the accessibility of dangerous drugs purchased through the global marketplace presents a unique challenge to CBP officers searching for them. But this seizure once again proves that our officers are up to the challenge here, or whatever. DMT is illegal in the U.S. as it has a high potential for abuse and no accepted medical use. Listen, that's all drugs. That's all drugs. You understand? All drugs are supposed to be illegal in America. You understand? Let's see. CBP officers did not mention if any suspects were apprehended. No suspects are never apprehended. They said it was headed towards Harford County. Let me make sure I said that right. Yep, Harford County, headed towards Harford County. So if you know it's headed towards Harford County, then evidently you have an address. Nobody has been arrested for this. Nobody has ever been arrested when they make big drug busts, except if they arrest blacks and Hispanics. That's the only time. You mean this was headed towards Harford County, but you don't have an address. You know it was headed towards Harford County. There had to be somebody waiting to pick it up, or somebody, an address for somebody. You understand? This is incredible. But this is America. Nothing is beneath America, What is DMT? It's I don't even want to say this word. Or DMT is a Schedule I controlled substance used for its powerful psychedelic and hallucinogenic effects like LSD. DMT occurs naturally in a wide variety of plants and animals, and when ingested causes brief episodic hallucinations per the National Institute of Health. This is crazy. This is crazy. Listen, this is just America. You understand? 104 pounds. 104 pounds. And once again, every time they make these huge drug busts, especially when these drug busts come in on these boats and planes and stuff like that, no one is ever charged. Someone had to pack that container up. Someone had to seal it. Someone had to check it. Someone knew it was on the boat. Somebody knew it was coming off the boat. But yet again, nobody's arrested. This is a part of the American dream. You understand? To be able to do what you want to do whenever you want to do and not be charged for a crime. You understand? That's the American way. You understand? It says 3 shipments arrived in the U.S. via air cargo from Chiapas, Mexico, between May 7th and May 27th. Each shipment had 4 boxes in total of 100 tightly sealed bags. When officers inspected the cargo, they found the brown powdery substance inside, sent it to CBD labs, where it was confirmed to be DMT. In total, there were 300 vacuum sealed bags worth a street value of $555,000. That means if they got this one, that means 3 got through. Whenever they get 1, 3 always gets through. That's by design. That's the American way. You understand? But later for that. Later for that. Let's get to the next article. Let me back up that. All right. Let's go to a little sports news, right? Listen, this says the Browns make a firm quarterback decision after benching Joe Flacco. Somebody tell me something, right? How's Joe Flacco still in the league? Now, I'm bringing this article because this is the same team that Shedeur Sanders, the number 1 pick in the draft, was supposed to have been the number 1 pick in the draft. And after every one of those owners, those team owners blackballed him not to be drafted. You understand? He got picked up by the Browns. He's a better quarterback than Joe Flacco, and Joe Flacco got benched after 2 weeks, which everybody knew that was going to happen. Shedeur Sanders is better than this guy, Dillon Gabriel. He's a better quarterback. He was way up above this quarterback, Dillon Gabriel. You understand? Better skill. You understand? But he's the starting quarterback. Now he's the starting quarterback. You understand? This is the reason why we should have never integrated with America. We should have stayed separated. You understand? We should have kept our own teams. We wouldn't be going through all of this. They can listen. When you move into somebody's house, you have to live by their rules, even if their rules change. Even if they don't live by their rules, the rules that they give, you have to live by because you're in their house. This National Football League is the oppressors' football league. This is not our league. So they get to do what they want to do. They get to do it in the way that they want to do it. Think about this, right? It is illegal for you to tamper with a player. And yet all 32 teams got together and blackballed one player so that he would not be a draft pick. They said that he was not supposed to get drafted. They were supposed to let him fall out of the draft and have to be a free agent pickup, or what do they call it? An undrafted free agent. You understand? Then he would have to prove himself all over again after he proved himself all the way through college. This is what the oppressor. This is what, and listen, just like I said, when you don't live in your own house, when you have to live by someone else's rules, even if they change the rules or they don't live by the rules that they make, you still have to live by those rules. And these are the consequences we have that we're in now. Let's read a little bit of this article. It says the Browns make a quarterback decision after pitching Joe Flacco for Dillon Gabriel. Former Oregon Duck star quarterback Dillon Gabriel got his first taste of the NFL action on Sunday, but it won't be a permanent change going forward. Gabriel, now with the Cleveland Browns, saw action in the Browns' 41-17 loss to the Baltimore Ravens. Starting quarterback Joe Flacco struggled in the loss, completing 25 of his 45 passes for 199 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Gabriel stepped in late in the contest and completed all 3 of his pass attempts for 20 yards and the first passing touchdown of his NFL career. However, after the game, Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski made it clear that he isn't considering a permanent quarterback change and will continue to roll with Flacco as the starter. He gonna ride and die with Joe Flacco. He gonna be fired. This quarterback, this coach is going to be out going with Joe Flacco. Wacko Flacco. Listen, they would rather chop off their own head than to go with a black quarterback that they know is proven and can make them a better team. This is the oppressor. This is what we have to put up with. You understand? Going into their league, this has always been the way. This has always been the way. Just giving up our own football league. This is the things that we have to go through. Now you got Flacco, a washed-up quarterback at the Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns have sucked since the 80s. Bernie Kosar was the last quarterback or the last winning quarterback in Cleveland. That's it. Bernie Kosar. You got to look him up in the history books. You understand? You got to look him up in the history books. Bernie Kosar. And they have every quarterback they had ever since has sucked. You understand? Just like the Cowboys. You understand? You got 2 owners who refuse to make the teams better because they don't want to make a black person the highlight of that team. You understand? And to be a better team, they would have to put Shedeur Sanders at quarterback to make that team a better team. But nope. The Negro is not going to be the hero. You understand? They said they don't want a Negro for their hero. You understand? So they said they'd rather suck. And that's why they going with Flacco. You understand? So that was some sports news right there. You understand? And the Cowboys suck too. That's just sidebar. That's my team. They suck. And they suck because they have the same kind of owner as the Browns. This is the reason why we should have never given up our football league, our baseball league, our basketball league. We should never have given up what we had to integrate with these people. Time after time after time, they show us who they are. And we continually put the blinders on and act as though we don't know what's going on. Well, here we go. Once again, I'm going to drop that article. Let's go to the next one. Look at this. Check this out. This is from The Guardian. Utah campus open carry rule under fresh scrutiny after Charlie Kirk shooting. You understand? Now they had an open carry law in Utah, an open carry law. That means you can carry your firearm on your hip. It can be seen. And if I'm not mistaken, they also say you can do the same thing with shotguns. Same thing. They have an open carry law. You understand? This is HB 128 passed in August, allows people with the proper permit to openly carry firearm on college campuses. So maybe Tyler Robinson had a proper permit to carry that gun on campus. I mean, what do you expect? You gave him a permit. We think. You understand? Because we know there are a lot of oppressors with permits to carry guns that should not have permits to carry guns. You understand? And they put those permits on us and they jam us up just so we can't carry. You understand? And you understand? They want to send, the National Guards into Chicago, into Baltimore, into DC. Well, you should be sending the National Guard into Utah, in Idaho, in Iowa, and all of those places where all of the terrorists live. You understand? That's where all the terrorists live. That's where all of the unalivers live. That's where all of the mass shooters live. You understand? In those areas, that's where they should be sending the National Guard. They should have had the National Guard at January 6th. What happened to that? And think about it, right? President Trump released all those January 6th rioters. You understand? Rioters, what? Terrorists. You understand? They were terrorists too. To attack what they call it, the national, to attack the Capitol. That's a terrorist act. You understand? He let them all go. But this is what the oppressor does. The oppressor loves his terrorists. He loves his unalivers. You understand? And then he wants to keep us in bondage. This is what happens. You understand? When you live in another person's house, these are the rules that we have to live under. You understand? Look, it says authorities. As authorities at the federal and state levels parse the details of the fatal shooting of far-right activist Charlie Kirk at a university in Utah, a recently passed state bill that allows people with concealed carry permits to carry firearms openly on college campuses has drawn fresh scrutiny. It should have. Look at what happened. And then the thing about it is they not mad at the people who did it. They mad at us. They mad at blacks and Hispanics. This is the reason. Listen, anything that happens with them, they're going to twist it and make it seem like it's our fault. And this is the reason why we should separate ourselves from them. In any marches that we have, any rallies that they have, especially behind this situation, we should not be there. We should not be involved in any of it. Because when they get together, especially under these circumstances, there's going to be another riot. There's going to be another unaliving. And we should be nowhere in the vicinity. This is how these people live. This is a part of their DNA. The people that came over here on that pilgrimage, the Mayflower and all of that, these are the type of people that were sent over here. The unalivers, the terrorists, you understand? The thieves and all of that. You keep mixing that DNA up, this is what you get. This is what you get. You get mass shooters. They said it was over 500 mass already this year. It wasn't us, but they include us in it. You understand? To make themselves, to mask themselves. What is a mass shooting? What is a mass shooting? A mass shooting is a person who shoots into a crowd and does not care who he hits. He is not after a particular person. He's just trying to unalive a mass number of people. That's a mass shooter. When we go out here, we start shooting at somebody, we make a mistake and hit other people. Well, they're mixing that into mass, which it's not a mass shooting, it's stupidity. And stupidity of us acting as our oppressor. A mass shooting is when someone comes in to unalive a mass number of people and he does not care who it is. That's a mass shooting. But someone who comes in and just shooting at somebody and makes a mistake and hits other people, that's not a mass shooting. That's just, like I said, stupidity. You understand? And that's what we are when we follow behind our oppressor. This is the reason why we should not follow behind the oppressor. We should not follow their customs and cultures. We should not do the things that our oppressor does, because it gets us jammed up and it puts us in a position as we're in today. You understand? Utah has allowed for permitless, open and concealed carry of weapons since 2021. Listen to this. Let me say that again. Utah has allowed for permitless, open and concealed carry of weapons since 2021. But before the passage of the HB 128, firearms had to be concealed when carried on college campuses. That means if you didn't have a permit, you had to conceal it. If you didn't have a permit for a weapon, you had to conceal your weapon on college campuses. So you didn't have to have a permit. If you have a permit, you can openly carry it. If you don't have a permit, you have to conceal it. Nonetheless, you can still carry it. That's a Utah law. See, listen, we keep saying that this is the United States, but this is the divided states of America. This is the divided state of America, because laws change from state to state. If anything was united about any of these states, there wouldn't be a blue or red. There wouldn't be a Republican or a Democrat. It would be one country, just one state, and the laws would be the same across the board. You wouldn't have Democrats go to Republicans and Republicans that throw to Democrats. To a court and hope that Congress passes the law, then it goes to the Senate and goes to all of these other places. You understand? The law would be handed down, and then that would be it. It's either a law or it's not. Then you keep having laws juggling and bouncing. Listen, this is the reason why we still fighting for civil rights today, because we living under a people who control the destiny of a captured people in America. And they can keep bouncing you around, telling you, oh, we're going to come up with reparations. We're going to talk about reparations. This is what keeps Black people holding on. Hope. That's the same thing Barack Obama shoved in our face. Hope. Hope. You hope they do something, as opposed to moving away, separating ourselves. And listen, when we say moving away, that doesn't mean we have to move out of the country, but we can be in this country but not be a part of this country. Look at the laws. Look at the laws that they create. Look, this is the law I have ever heard. If you don't have a permit for a gun, you have to conceal your carry. You have to conceal it. That's what Black people do every day. But we don't live in Utah. So, and listen, look at where they make these laws at. They make these laws at places where we are not. Now, there are some places where they allow Black people to open carry. But you have to have permits. You have to have licenses. But I've never heard of a place where if you don't have a permit, You have to conceal your weapon. It's divided states of America. Like I said, if this was the United States, every state would have the same laws. And if every state would have the same laws, you wouldn't need governments all over each state. They have one government. They pass down laws and it covers everybody. And this is why you got so many governments. This is why you got to read papers and read books to see what laws are when you go to another state. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. But this is America. America does. Listen, it says, when the law passed in August, university staff voiced concerns about what carrying could mean for classroom emergencies that might require students to act as armed responders, and their presence in laboratories were harmful and potent chemicals where potent chemicals were stored. While it's unclear whether the suspected shooter, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, was legally allowed to own the hunting rifle used in the shooting or have one on a university campus, the proximity between the bill's passing and the shooting has pushed the law into headlines across the U.S. The bill did not come in a vacuum, but added to Utah's already Second Amendment friendly legislative landscape. The state doesn't have extreme risk protection orders, known as the red flag laws, which allow people such as police officers and family members to petition a judge to have someone's firearm temporarily taken away. See, we got them laws all over Baltimore. They can do that in Baltimore. If they find you as a potential risk, somebody can come in and report you and they can come and take your firearm. Yes, they don't have it in Utah. And because they don't have it in Utah, you see what happened. You understand? That's the people of Utah's problem. You understand? We should not be in Utah. It says, listen, it is one of 29 states that allow people to carry concealed firearms without a permit. It has a law aiming to get guns out of the hands of people in crisis, but requires people to flag themselves in the federal background check system. When Utah lawmakers have addressed campus safety, their efforts have typically centered on K-12 schools, or, from kindergarten to the 12th grade to high school. You understand? Where there is a greater expectation and need for campuses to be largely closed to the public. There, in lieu of policies restricting gun access and training requirements for prospective concealed carry permit applicants, the state has leaned into legislation meant to make it harder for shooters to enter and move freely around schools, for example, by adding doors with automatic locks, surveillance cameras, and fencing. Then what they need to do is just properly assess any oppressor from the age of 14 up to 89. If you assess them, you would get most of your shooters, your mass shooters, off the streets or guns out of their hands. But they don't like to, they don't like to assess themselves properly. And because they don't like to assess themselves properly, this is the reason why we keep having all of these mass shootings. That's the reason why. You understand? This approach, known as school hardening, is to deter shooters from entering schools and responding quickly to stop them and secure students. For example, HB 119, which passed last year, incentivizes K-12 teachers to get training so they can keep a firearm in their classroom, which could potentially be dangerous too, depending on who the teachers are. You understand? The teacher get upset, get angry enough. You have a mass shooting right there in the classroom. You understand? These people are not a smart people. And this is the reason why we should not be under them. But here we are, you know. Let's see, what's this say? To get training to keep a firearm in the classroom. HB 84, a sweeping piece of legislation passed in 2024, requires classrooms to have panic devices and schools to have at least one armed person, be it a school resource officer or security guard on campus daily. Advocates of Utah's gun laws have argued that making sure guns are easily accessible can serve as a deterrent, whether to would-be home invaders, carjackers, or shooters hoping to take advantage of soft targets like malls, campuses, and grocery stores, and allow for armed responses if someone starts shooting. Yeah. It sounds good. You know, it sounds good. But at the same time, if you don't assess the people and if you don't call out who the real mass shooters are, and if you don't assess them properly, the same thing is going to continue to happen. And they're going to keep acting like, oh, we don't know what's happening. The laws, it's not the laws that's doing this. It's the people that's doing this. If you can't assess properly, it's going to continue, you know? It's just going to continue. It's going to be one thing after another, you know? You can drop that. Yeah, let's read this one right here. Look at this. This is from CNN. Police arrested a 13-year-old in Washington State who had everything ready to go for a mass shooting. Here we go again in Washington State. And guess who it is? It's the oppressor. It's the oppressor. Oh, I got to drop my age to 13 because he's 13 years old. So from 13 to 89. 13 to 89. Now, somebody tell me, where does a 13-year-old get all of these guns from? How does he get access to these guns? How does he get access to ammunition? His parents, of course, says, listen, when police arrested a 13-year-old boy in Washington State last week, accused of making threats to kill, they found he had everything ready to go to commit a mass shooting, including a trove of more than 20 guns in his home. He was arrested after Pierce County Sheriff Office received information Friday from an internet watch group that reports threatening online posts. Deputy Carlos Capetto told CNN. After reviewing the suspect's social media post, it was warranted to immediately move forward with an arrest. Capetto said authorities believe the boy had school shooter ideation. Yeah, he did. When a SWAT team descended on the boy's home located in suburban area of Parkland, Washington. That's where they all live at, out in the suburbs. Then they come into the city to commit their crimes, and they go back out into the suburbs to lay their heads. Listen, it says around 1 a.m. Saturday, they found a collection of 23 firearms, several boxes of ammunition, loaded magazines with school shooter writing on them, as well as clothing and writings typical of mass shooting scenarios, Capetto said. The arrest comes as students around the United States settle into a new school year and the persistent threat of gun violence that comes with it. Last month, 2 young children were killed and more than a dozen people were wounded in a shooting during a mass marking the first week of classes at a Catholic school in Minneapolis, just as a wave of active shooter hoaxes at the more than a dozen universities strained law enforcement resources and stoked fears about carnage on campuses. How about that? Our oppressor is the terrorist of the earth. Our oppressor is the mass shooter. Our oppressor is the mass unaliver. That's it. You understand? That's it. This is the reason why we need to be amongst ourselves. We need to be amongst our own, and we need to take care of our own people instead of turning our back and looking the other way and saying you gotta do that. You gotta do for yourself. You understand? A lot of us look too much towards our oppressor, and look what happens. I want to see what happens to that 13. I want to see what happens. What are they going to do with his parents? See, now, if that was a black person, the parents would have been locked up. Parents would have been locked up. All of those guns, notes, ammunition, scenarios of how to carry out a mass shooting, the parents would have been locked up. We're going to wait for this article to settle, and we're going to see what happens to this one. You understand? With that, this is the universal practice. This is the ISUPK, 1 West, 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under Commanding General Johanna. This is the 1 West News Desk under Captain Saparia. I'm Officer of a Thumb holding it down for Captain Saparia. And with that, shalom, Israel.